grew up in Karachi. A lot of my formative years were spent in Pakistan. So I did my O levels and A levels before leaving, and so I actually used to live in an area which is not known for being quite residential. So it was really in southern, actually, by the Coast Guard, National Coast Guard headquarters. So it was quite a remote area in the sense that most of my schooling was in the Clifton side. My friends and everyone lived over there. So I really was in an area which was kind of the old Karachi. So, and sometimes almost the forgotten for a lot of people. And there were a lot of places that were kind of neglected. Buildings were neglected, just in terms of maintenance, and there are quite a few old architectures that were kind of decaying. So it was something that you would see a lot, and kind of your eyes get used to it. But if you really stop and look at, the beauty of some of parts of the city, Empress Market being one area that recently has seen some good initiative to bring it back into a good condition. But growing up and back in the day, it wasn't very it was kind of forgotten. So the buildings and architecture and all that stuff, I mean, there's obviously costs involved with maintaining that. So a lot of the times there's that is a big factor to play as to why they've been neglected. But that was some of my experiences growing up in the city. I was also being over there, you'd have to go through electronic market all the time to get home, and always through rush hour, quite a lot of traffic, either coming back from school or heading out to meet friends. There was always at least an additional 30 to 40 minutes with traffic in that area. So the infrastructure and the roads and the congestion were really a part of my daily life, and something that stuck with me throughout my entire life. And then after that, left for university in London. So I studied there for 3 years with my undergraduate degree at UCL, University College London, majored in economics. And I always wanted to work in the banking industry, in the banking sector, and especially in New York. So I was quite fortunate that I had that opportunity, but it was also a difficult time in banking in general in 2009, so right at the peak of the global financial crisis, or when it was all unraveling everywhere across the world. So I was quite fortunate to be able to land a job at JP Morgan Chase in New York, working actually on Wall Street in the retail banking division. And that's kind of how I started my career. Learned quite a lot in the first few years working in that sort of environment. In Wall Street, surprising to many people is you actually see people from all walks of life. So you have the bankers, the traders, senior management, but then you also have your everyday construction workers, people who work in stores and shops, and they all have to bank at some point, and a lot of people come into the branches. So working in the financial services industry in New York was really an opportunity to learn from some of the brightest minds on Wall Street and in the banking industry. I joined, whenever I changed my roles within the company at JP Morgan, it was always a time of change, or a time of kind of a mass market impact, if you will. So, when I started my career, it was at the beginning of the global financial crisis. So a lot of people who were from all different sorts of backgrounds and industries, some people who lost their jobs actually had to start at junior positions, which is the position that I was in. So I really got to rub shoulders with people from all walks of their career in the banking industry. So it was a great opportunity to learn from people like that. And then when I moved to the investment banking side, it was the mandatory requirements from the government to start clearing derivatives, more regulation around derivatives. And so there were a lot of challenges with market participants such as buy-side hedge funds or asset managers or small regional banks, to have them transfer their whole entire workflows under these new regulations. And so then having the opportunity to work with those sorts of institutional clients who have quite a lot of experience in the industry, again, was another opportunity to learn quite a lot about the space. And the financial services in general obviously spans across a whole gamut of products and services, but I think where it all came together for me, in terms of seeing everything from end to end, was when I moved from JP Morgan to the buy side. So when I joined Alphadyne, which is a hedge fund in New York, really at JP Morgan, it's a great place to learn and grow, but like any large organization, you don't really see the entire end-to-end kind of workflow and how everything fits together. So either you work in investment banking, and within investment banking, there's operations, there's finance, there's legal, there's treasury. There's all these different groups where they're kind of siloed. And then when I moved over to the buy side, I really understood end to end how an organization can work, and how different teams can function together, the dependencies between them, issues around kind of managing the different personalities, people management on the team. I managed a small team of around 5 people. So really, it was a good opportunity for me to learn that, and in a sense, it was almost teeing me up for getting into my own venture or participating in a small business, because a small hedge fund is technically a small business. So we had maybe 50 people when I joined. We doubled by the time I left, but a lot of those experiences and the ability to be able to do everything that's required for the business. From some of the responsibilities I had were finance, accounting, operations, kind of trade assistance, kind of closing up our books at the end of every month and printing our final numbers. And so all of that was kind of put on our plate, and it's really proven to be useful and insightful for starting, a small business or a startup in general. Yeah, so having spent 10 years in the industry, working for other people and other organizations, I really wanted to take a reset and understand myself a little bit better in terms of what would my next career move be. You can end up being in a job where you're just working for retirement, so to speak, where just working the regular shifts, and really your actions are good for your own personal development, but at the end of the day, what impact or what legacy are you leaving for yourself and for the rest of society? And so one of the things that I've always been interested in is connecting with my roots in Pakistan. Being abroad, it's easy to forget where you come from, and I've come across a lot of Pakistanis who don't acknowledge their roots and forget that they're Pakistani at times. And to be honest, there were moments in my life where I was one of those people, but I always wanted to circle back and bring it back to being honest with myself and with my roots and being proud of who I am and where I'm from. And that's something I try to distill with, starting a family and myself and my son. Having him being connected to where he's from is quite important. And so I wanted to do something where I could use my experiences in the West and all of this knowledge and resources that I've learned, and kind of bring it back to Pakistan in some capacity. The idea was what would make the biggest impact? What would I be able to provide my knowledge and expertise on, kind of make that useful in the most efficient way. And so, Jamshed had approached me about this organization that he was looking to start, and this idea and this business plan. And it was really a piece of paper when we first started discussing it. And we really, we really focused on what skills we could both bring and other members of the team could bring to an organization like this. And it really resonated with me that we'd be looking to tackle a severe problem in the country. Looking at the statistics when I was doing the research on, how Pakistan stands up against other similar economies, developing economies in the world when it comes to mortgage depth and mortgage penetration, it was really an eye-opener as to, we're really the last country on every single list when it comes to these measures. And so we have countries in Africa that are ahead of us, countries in the Far East, South Asia as well. And so there's a real huge opportunity for Pakistan. I'm quite bullish on the country itself, and I really wanted to put my money where my mouth is and do something that would help the country as a whole. So I'm the Chief Risk Officer at Trellis, so really responsible for building the risk infrastructure and some data analytics as well. But ultimately what that means is understanding from a credit risk perspective, primarily what are our key challenges with understanding the credit risk profile of our borrowers. So that's on a spectrum of the ability to repay as well as their willingness to repay the loan. How do we assess that on a consistent basis across all our applicants? And then using that intelligence and that information, being able to make informed decisions about extending loans, long-term loans in this case, in the housing finance space, to these individuals and these households. So that's our primary kind of objective within the risk department, and this is credit risk being the large one. We also have to keep in mind how property prices change in the country and by region and by kind of property type, because ultimately our loans are going to be collateralized by the actual physical immovable properties. So understanding how we're exposed to that collateral risk as well in terms of price changes is really, really crucial. So that's where kind of the data analytics piece comes in as well. What really excites me about the role and the position is I'm a quantitative person by nature. I'm pretty proficient in Python and computer programming, and so being able to utilize that in this role to understand the data and to build out these credit models is really something that I'm really keen on and interested in. And then ultimately the social impact of our organization as well, and what we're doing is actually impacting people's lives and changing the way that they live, and being able to empower them to build their assets and then pass down those assets to other family members is really something that's important for me, and it reminds us as time and again why we're doing this and the real reason and the real driving force behind it. Yeah, absolutely. So I touched upon it before in terms of understanding the credit risk of our borrowers. So that's really crucial in this process, and the fact that at Trellis we're actually targeting the low-income demographic. There's, unlike the West where most people have access to credit markets, right? They have credit cards or auto loans or home loans already. In a country like Pakistan, which is less inclined for debt and really aren't even able to access the debt markets or credit markets rather as efficiently as in the West, we end up with a situation where we're not really able to understand people's credit worthiness on face value, because there are credit reports available from the government and from other private institutions. However, most people don't have a credit history. So that's one of the key challenges, is really understanding people's credit worthiness. But at the same time, a lot of our target demographic borrowers are subject to variable income. So these are self-employed individuals, or people who are working in agriculture, or working as taxi drivers or shop owners, and these people are subject to variation in their income, and then based on seasonal demand and seasonal factors. So really mapping those cash flows accordingly on a yearly basis, and understanding how that might impact their ability to repay their loan. And the ways that we're trying to mitigate some of that risk is developing a behavioral scorecard. And so what that does is allows us to check up on our borrowers every 6 months to a year, and understand how their financial situation has changed since the last meeting, and whether that might impact their ability to repay their loan. So that might mean an assessment of their business over the last 6 months. Do they have any expected life changes coming up? Do they have any new dependents in their household, or any familial structural changes, which could really impact that, and then help us understand that situation so we can get ahead of issues like late payments or delinquencies, or in the worst case, defaults. So really developing all of that from the ground up, and something that really hasn't been done before in a country like Pakistan, is quite a huge undertaking. So there's a lot of research and work that has to be done, and understanding from the market and from our potential borrowers what types of situations would lead them to end up not meeting their obligations. So that's one of the key challenges that we're facing and we're trying to address. But it's going to be an evolving process over time. And so we're very keen on being data driven as an organization. And so the more information we can collect and gather, and if we're able to process that efficiently, the better we will be at making these key decisions in the business. So really our vision for Trellis is to get to really become the first entrant into this market for housing finance in Pakistan. There's a huge opportunity and a huge gap which needs to be filled in the affordable housing space, and really that's our focus and our main reason for entering this space for this time. But over the course of our evolution, we do feel and we do believe that the core to really a quality of life and standard of living that most people take for granted is having a house or a roof over your head. And alongside that come a lot of different needs and requirements, such as water filtration, sewage, proper sewage and sanitation, solar energy, being able to not depend on the actual power grid, which is subject to a lot of power outages, and then things like your basic education, which we think is a right that everybody should have. So those are things and products that we can bundle up into our offering, and we do see that we do envision there being a green mortgage, right? A bundled offering where someone can take a loan to purchase a house, but we can also tie in all of these different auxiliary requirements for a basic standard of living, and then at the end of the day someone just has to repay a one-time payment every month and not have to worry about having access to all these different requirements and necessities of life. So that's where we see the organization growing over time, but it's very much centered around enabling people to get out of poverty by bringing them onto the property ladder, and essentially allowing them to build assets over time. Sure. So I'm not working on Trellis. I do try to become more active with exercise. So I've started doing some swimming, some biking. I've always been an outdoor person in terms of liking the outdoors. So trying to go for walks or hiking whenever possible. And then, I enjoy cooking. I think it's an activity which uses a different part of the brain. You have to be a little creative sometimes, so I enjoy doing that. It's a way for me to unwind. And then also, just investing in myself and further improving upon my skill set is something that I really want to embrace and continue doing. When I was working my typical salaried 9-to-5 job, or in more cases more like 8-to-7 job, in the corporate world, you don't really have time to do these things. And working in a startup is similar, but you kind of just have to commit to it and make the time for it. And so I'm also I spent some time learning computer programming, so now I'm proficient in Python, and I'm using that in my everyday work with Trellis now. And I'm also continuing to learn, educate myself, so I'm studying for the financial risk manager exam as well. And so, it's a lot of just continuing to learn, continuing to read and understand, new developments that are happening, and just keeping yourself up to speed with everything, and staying on top of all of it.